Hi, everybody. Welcome to this seminar. Hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. Chris Ericson, first past president of the New York State Brewers Association. Good to see you all. Today we're going to have a talk by Devon Hoffman. He is a digital marketing specialist for SiteSeeker. When he's not using his computer to help find and visit every brewery in New York State, he's using it to help business partners achieve their digital marketing goals. These goals may include location marketing and optimization, digital advertising, search engine optimization, and then anything in between. And then he's back searching for breweries again. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Devon Hoffman.
God, I wrote that.
I wrote that.
Thanks again, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and coming and hearing some things of some kind of tips and tricks and best practices inside of the digital marketing space. As Chris noted, I'm a digital marketing specialist with SiteSeeker, and one of the areas that I really like to put a lot of focus, and it kind of builds from passion, is breweries, and kind of on trips to visit them, kind of see some things that have been working and haven't been working, and trying to determine a topic that I thought would be helpful for breweries at the time was moments after kind of seeing, scrolling through Facebook, a number of posts related to hey, we're going to have to be closed this Saturday because we don't have enough staff, or, we're shifting our hours over the next couple of weeks because of, cooks and stuff like that. And it kind of showed, an opportunity of two very related topics, which was the need to kind of support staffing, but then also that customer communication element of it, because things change and evolve and kind of update so frequently, especially looking over the last 2 years. I remember actually a discussion, Chris, you and I were having, back in 2020 on, a lot of people were kind of relying on pinned posts on Facebook. But 36 hours after that post would go up, information changed. And so as a consumer, there was a lot of questions of, is this still accurate? This is from 3 weeks ago. Like, is this what I should follow? So, trying to kind of use those things in mind and things and tools that you have at your disposal and, opportunities you can take advantage of. So if you do have a situation that arises, a need to either update your customer or to find some team members, you're going to be in a better shape for it. So one of the things is kind of starting on, we say staffing through advocacy. So perfect. That's good timing. So, no, it's really good.
It's updated.
Yeah. I can speak without it. So there's three areas that we really look at when it comes to where that focus can go. And the idea of when I say staffing for advocacy, or via advocacy, is what you need to think of is going to be the journey. If you have a need, are you acting immediately? Or how are you trying to get that information? What I see a lot is people will try and do one of two things. They'll either try and do organic post on social media and say, tag someone, or we're looking to fill this, or the post is the whole job description or something like that. And then my cousin or my aunt is going to tag me and say, this looks like a great fit for you, Devon. Trust me, you do not want me cooking food or brewing your beer. And so, but that's kind of what that reach is touching, or you're going to try and go the route of advertising. And maybe it's the same post and putting a boost or something like that behind it. But you've got to think, what's the next step? Is there just at the bottom of a C more where it consists of email this or call this or something like that. What you want to kind of map out is going to be a journey of somebody who's going to have an opportunity to want to work for your company, and then also as a part of that, present your brand. Just as much as you need them, you're going to want them to work for you. And so that's a great visual for digital. Is going to be what areas you should focus on. So there's 3 areas, and it's going to be your website, and it's going to be social, and it's going to be local SEO, which in short is reviews. And I can explain what would have been up, and it's just icons, so this is good enough. When we think about your website, and the reason I say website when we're talking about kind of this journey is because that's where you want to push people to. In marketing, and digital marketing in particular, we always kind of say that Google is the brain that runs your business's digital marketing. But your website is the heart. And so you really do want to be able to interconnect all your platforms, be it your website or your social or things like that. And so if you do have opportunities and job openings, you want to be able to present those on a page or pages on your website so that people have a place to go, they have a place to reach out, they have a place to apply. But then you can also see through the other efforts you're going to try, be it through social media, be it through advertising, be it through word of mouth, how those are coming to you. So that way you can track for the future, which options worked. And so on your website, there's a number of things you really want to focus on to make sure you can maximize its performance and what people are getting out of it. And so one of those is going to be, those are going to be user experience, site speed, e-commerce, which I'll get to, and actually ADA compliance. And so user experience is the first one. It's just the ease of use of the site, organization, looking at colors, images. You want a website that's inviting, informational, but also presents your brand's identity. You've got a story to tell. The thing that's so great about the brewing industry is every brewery is unique. And it's those, you can try a lot of beers, but I like to go to breweries so I can get the experience, I can hear the stories, I can meet the people. So it should present that, it should showcase that. And so you want to be able to, put all that information, all those graphics, things like that in place. But you also want it to be easy to navigate, easy to look. If you do have openings, if you do have opportunities, those should be featured somewhere where people can access them, they can see that. Then we get into site speed, and this is kind of a branch off user experience. People don't like slow. And a lot of what we're seeing in the digital space is just a desire for immediacy. It's actually more is moving towards people just trying to stick inside of Google to get their information. And so they say every second at over 2 seconds that it takes a page or your website to load, you lose 50% of the traffic that's on it. So it's just something you want to make sure you're monitoring. And, there's easy ways to improve your site speed using smaller images. Our cell phones are fantastic and they can take really great pictures. You upload them as is to your website, the file is actually gigantic and it can really slow it down. So you want to be able to focus on site speed. There we go. Okay. And yeah, okay, see? The most surprising thing is that I remembered all this. And so then you want to look at site speed. Because again, it's one of those things. And so now what we're kind of talking about is where it gets into that advocacy, because you're going to say, what does my site speed have to do with staffing, Devon? But what it is it's looking at that journey. If you want to get some people, if you want to talk about opportunities that are open, positions, things like that, and you want to drive them to your website, you don't want them to have to wait 4 minutes to kind of submit an application for you to give you that information. And you also want them to be willing to come back and say, that's something I want to check out again, you know? And so, so then that's where we get into e-commerce. And the purpose of adding e-commerce into this discussion is because now we're getting into the marketing element of things. And when you can have, you know, products and opportunities for online sales integrated with your website, that's actually taken into consideration by tools like Google. And so if people are looking for things and opportunities, there's a better chance that, you know, you can actually get impressions and traffic and things like that. And again, it goes back to communicating that brand. I love hats. Okay, I have too many of them, and every time I go to a place or see them, like, I have been like mouth-watering seeing the number of hats people upstairs are giving away, and it's just like, I'm not a brewery, but can I have every one of these hats? But that's one of those things where even if I was looking at an opportunity at a place and maybe it's too far away, the position didn't work out, it's one of the things I take into consideration and I look at, like, let me see their style, let me see their look, let me see the branding, and you can see that in cases through, you know, what you have available. And the last one is ADA compliance, and there's two reasons why it's important to think of this when you're thinking about your website. And really, the considerably more important reason is so that your website is equally accessible to everybody. ADA compliance, there is actually expectations very similar to your brewery. I'm sure you all ran into it, you know, for what you had in your restrooms. Is there handicap entrances, you know, parking, things like that. There's an equal expectation that your website is accessible. And so people can go to your website that need to use screen readers. People can come to your website that, you know, have certain visual concerns. And so they actually need to be able to, in some cases, have tools read the content from your site to them or tell them what is in a picture on it and things like that. So when you're actually making adjustments and updates to your site, what we see sometimes is people will just download a picture from Facebook and then upload it. If you've ever downloaded a picture from Facebook, you'll see that the title of the picture is like 27x4377972. You know, what you actually really want to do is change that and have it be, you know, pint on the bar with a customer.jpg. And so now there's an opportunity that can actually be, you know, consumed by someone who might have a disability that's visiting your site. The second reason is because we actually saw an uptick over the last 3 years in ADA-based lawsuits, specifically related to websites. And the two primary locations where those lawsuits were happening were New York State and Florida. And the industry in New York that was seeing it the most was the wine industry, but there was some breweries that actually were kind of a part of some of those lawsuits. So it kind of circled to be more beverage focused, and it was people saying, you know, almost as they would if they couldn't visit your brewery because it didn't have accessibility, that they couldn't get information from your website. And so there's some simple ways to do that. Like I said, you know, naming structure on things like your images. There's an expectation that your website will have an accessibility statement just in the footer. And all that statement has to say is if you are having trouble finding the information you're looking for, please reach out to us via email, phone, and someone will be back to you within 24 or 48 hours, whatever you can support. And that's, you know, a real good opportunity to make an effort towards ADA compliance. So what I'll say is it's impossible to say that a website's ADA compliant, but you can make efforts towards compliance. So from, your website, and again, the reason that I wanted to speak to the website is, again, it's that journey. So there's two people we're talking about here for a journey. The journey of a person you're hoping to join your team, and the journey of the people that are hoping to visit you who might need to get updated along the way because of evolution that's happening within the company. And so I always say your destination wants to be your website. That's got to be the place where all this information in traffic is going to kind of flow through. But obviously, people consume their information from sorts all over the place of tools and software, and so social media comes into play. And this is obviously just scratching the surface when it comes to social media. But the same goals that you have on communicating your brand, talking about your brewery, talking about your products, talking about your average consumer is got to be kind of replicated across the board. What tool behind me here makes sense? Probably the biggest question that I get asked by people is, should I be on TikTok? Should I don't really want to. And I actually, it's funny thinking of that now and thinking towards the future, because we presented on marketing at the show 3 years ago. And at that time, I had done a survey of like 200 breweries in the state, specifically around marketing. And one of the things we had asked them was, what social media tools or platforms are you on? And 100% said Facebook. And I think the next most was Instagram, and it was like 60%, and then lower from there. And about a year ago, I was speaking to a group of breweries, and someone said, should I be on Facebook? Should I switch to Instagram? I just feel like that's where it's going. And now I hear a lot of conversations where certain places are saying, hey, I'm going to lead with Instagram. That's going to be where I go first. Once I kind of have a foundation, I'm happy with where I'm at on Instagram, then I'll look to Facebook. And so just kind of thinking of that evolution over 3 years, what I've kind of said in terms of a thing like TikTok is it's really not a question of if I should be on TikTok, but more so when I should be on TikTok. But really the trick here is always going to be do the right one first correctly, and then kind of build from there. Too often I hear and see people say, I want to get on everything. You're going to find me on LinkedIn. You're going to find me on Topics. Is that even around? You're going to find me on, every possible website. And then they do a little bit of each. And so what they have is an unsuccessful, following in all these tools. And it really is going to come down to your customer and who you're typically seeing come into the brewery, or who you typically want to see come into the brewery. And so maybe it's, hey, I got to start off with Facebook. And I want to build my following. I want to understand it. I want to get it into a place where I'm getting posts out. I've got good communication, and I'm happy. There's advertising. Now I want to start to branch out and do the same in Instagram. And you can kind of build it out from there. And the same approach goes for when you have to start to use these tools to promote maybe openings or positions that you might have, is to say, okay, which one are we in a position that we can start to get some communication out about and things like that. So with these, I put together from some conversations I had with people about what the tip and trick is when it comes to social media. There's character limits. What's the difference with advertising? What's the deal with hashtags? If a hashtag on Twitter should have 6 characters and a hashtag on Instagram should have 25. And so we took an effort to go through all sorts of different studies that broke down all the different tools, what you should keep in mind when you're working on them, when you're advertising on them, and things like that. And we kind of came up with a cheat sheet for breweries specific to the platforms you see here. So I actually have copies of that up here if anyone wants to grab at the end. And you'll have an opportunity to kind of see those tips and tricks, because one of the most important things, especially if you're trying to branch out to people who don't follow you organically on these tools, these platforms is going to be advertising. And so you probably know if you're doing advertising on Facebook, you have the ability to target, special and specific demographics. It's going to be sometimes a little bit of a challenge, especially for breweries and especially for hiring, because hiring is considered a special category, and special categories can't have demographic ranges like age and things like that. But also, if you're a brewery, you can't target advertising to under 21. So there's kind of a catch-22 that's built in there. But we've worked with partners and through that very situation and needing to do boosts around hiring as a purveyor of alcoholic beverages and able to get some of those advertisements up. But it's really just understanding the tool, and again, for example, TikTok, you can only advertise to your organically grown following. So it's knowing which direction, where you want to start from, building out, that reach. And then when you have a situation where you need to start communicating, whether it's needs or even good topics like new beers, events, things like that, your kind of across the board foundation will be in a better position to do so. So then that goes on to the third one, which is sometimes what the toughest pill to swallow in the beverage industry from conversations I've had, which is feedback or like reviews, specifically on beer review apps. And I get it. This was the worst IPA because I hate IPAs is a very difficult thing to see and read. Or I've seen 1-star reviews and it's like, I've never been there, but they need to earn my 5 stars. And it's like, well, they didn't have a chance to. But there is an almost undefinable benefit across the board to reviews, especially when you're going to get into things like Google and showing up in Google, when you're going to get into, even in social media platforms, Facebook transitioned from star ratings to recommends and doesn't recommends. They went to kind of a more black and white approach there. But it's the same thing where you want to show that people recommend it. It is very real that people will trust the word of a stranger more than the word of a friend because they feel like it's like a more raw and an honest piece of feedback. So I see all the time where, there's, someone's got 4 stars and I'm like, oh, I want to check this place out. And a friend will be like, man, but they only got 4 stars. So like for me, I want to be able to go, but it's influencing them. We're going to look in a little bit at Google My Business, for example, and you're going to know that it's actually the volume of reviews that gets weighted in put businesses on a map over the rating itself. So a 4.5 rating can show up above a 4.8 if it's got 500 more reviews because, as far as Google's concerned, they are actually getting more, you know what I mean? So there's probably more 5s in there, in those kind of things. So there is a lot of value to trying to like maximize, those reviews, that outreach. So then again, it comes back to you're kind of filling this journey, whether it's getting people to come and visit you and have a beer and, spend some time with you, or if somebody's looking, you have an opening and they're looking to join, they're going to do a little bit of research on their own. And if they're, not seeing great feedback from people who are visiting you, is that the environment that they want to, jump into? So it is always important to keep, reviews in mind. So then that's going to bring us to Google My Business. So I could talk for the rest of the day until midnight about Google My Business. And I'm going to say the computer's going to want me to. And it really is, the perfect kind of continuation of this discussion from those other points. When we're talking about the website, when we're talking about social media, when we're talking about local SEO and reviews, everything kind of then cycles back through Google My Business. I talk about it a lot because I feel it's the lowest hanging fruit as far as communication about your brewery and the ability to interact with new customers and people that are looking for an opportunity to visit you. I'll tend to visit breweries like I didn't write, like Chris came up with earlier, about like that's how I like to spend my lunch break at work is what section do I want to drive to this weekend and have some breweries to visit, and I'm doing all that research out of Google. And so determining maybe an itinerary or the plans for my trip or things like that is really drawn to what information I can see inside of Google. Oh, is there food available? So this can be a lunch stop, that kind of stuff is all coming from Google My Business. And so the easiest, the best, the most important piece of feedback I can give you is if you haven't claimed your Google My Business listing, claim it. So that way you can control the information that's up there. I had mentioned earlier, having done a survey with breweries in the state, when we did that, only 60%, 62% had access and claimed their Google My Business listing. And so if you don't have it claimed, just the general public and Google is identifying that information for you, and they're filling that in. And over the last few years, it's really grown as to how Google wants to, what information it wants to have available for you inside of your listing. And so at a time, it was just, hours, website, phone number, we're good. Now there's tons of geolocations that happen. So you can actually, if I was to scroll down there where it's highlighted Big Ditch, it'll actually show you the popular times based on how it's located people from their phones. And so people are using it even beyond as a tool now to say, yikes, it's saying it's busier than usual. I'm not sure if I want to go. And while you can't really control if that's the case, you really want to make sure you've got accurate, up-to-date information. The other part in Google My Business is going to be imagery. It's going to be pictures. Google loves user-generated content, and most of the time, you're going to have a really good, portfolio. If somebody's taking a picture and they're like, man, I really want to post this, I want to showcase this, it's probably a good picture. It's not, an issue to have in your gallery. But sometimes what'll happen is I'll be halfway through a burger and I'll say, this is the best burger I've ever eaten. I need to post this up on the internet. But it actually just looks like a half-eaten hamburger. So it might not be the way you wanted someone to kind of see that. Or 1 in the morning, I think I'm a great photographer. 7 in the morning, I don't think those pictures are as good as I thought they were at the time. So what you want to be able to do is also fill the gallery. So that way, if people are looking through and they're trying to see, what to expect, they want to see the bar, they want to see the facilities. If you've got tours, they want to see what that route looks like. You can control a little bit by making sure you have the images and things like that added. Additionally, if you've got access to it, you've probably seen the Street View option inside of Google where you can go and kind of go. I do that if I'm visiting places so I know that I'm going to the right place. You can do that with the interior too. And you can do a 360 cam inside so people actually kind of have an opportunity to get a taste for the ambiance before they actually get there. And really the more you can build out your listing and your inside of Google My Business, the better opportunity that it'll have for people to kind of, have a chance to visit you. Like I had mentioned earlier, and this is obviously we're talking about the customer communication part of this now, is the unplanned. The, oh crap, oh what just happened? That can be the case if you're short-staffed or if, there's power goes out. or the water stops pouring, or you ran out of CO2, or whatever the case may be, if you need to kind of shift at a moment. What we'll see sometimes is people will just say, hey, due to unforeseen circumstances, we're going to be closing at 3 o'clock today. Sorry, we'll be open at 11 again tomorrow. And they'll throw that up as a post on Facebook. And then maybe they'll forget they had a scheduled post to go out an hour after that. And so that's, I don't see the other one, and I go into Google and it says you're open till 10. That's how you can create those situations where people are trying to visit you. And you're closed, not for any fault of your own. They didn't have an opportunity to know. I took a vacation last year, and pretty much the goal was just visit breweries between New York and Michigan. And there was 13 breweries that I had made an effort to go to that either were closed when it said they were open in Google, or later found out they were open when it said they were closed, so I didn't make an attempt to go there. And the issue in that setting is I just didn't follow them on Facebook. I was using Google as a tool to say, breweries in, Dayton, Ohio that I was going to be traveling through, and I just picked the first 3, which they were the first 3 because of the reviews and how that, populated that information, and kind of how I was able to fill that in. So what's the solution? What can you do? Claim your listing. But also, Google My Business has an app. And so just as much as you probably say, I'm going to pull out my phone and do a post real quick to let people know, that we've got to close early, then you can jump into your Google My Business app and you can just do an hours adjustment. And it doesn't have to be like, well, now we're closed at 3 o'clock every Thursday. You can just say for this particular day. If you have to close, the next day. I've got a client that I work with, and they close for the month of January. I didn't want to change their hours to not being open because it would mark them as permanently closed. So what I did is I just temporarily set every day in January and marked it as closed. So just for those particular days, closed. February 1st, open again. I think that that's a good way to really kind of be able to kind of communicate to people that might have been planning or haven't visited you yet, or is just looking for an opportunity to stop in. I remember talking to a brewery in the city. This is probably 5 years ago now, and their Google My Business listing had them open from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. And so I asked them, you close at 8? And they said, no, we typically close at, between 12 and 2. And, but, we just put 8 because sometimes, we might need to leave a little early, and we just didn't want people to be upset that, we weren't here. And so I said, you're missing out on, 6 hours a day of people knowing that they can come visit you. If I was in the city, so I'm from central New York, and it was 9 p.m. and I would have wanted to maybe visit, it would look like you're closed. I wouldn't have an opportunity to. And I'd stop there. I wouldn't check, that would kind of be the end of it. So it's really important to just make sure you kind of have that accurate information. And the other thing within Google My Business is a lot of the things that you're going to see. So here in this one particular highlighted listing, you can see that dine-in, curbside pickup, delivery, stuff like that. While you can control the information, Google is constantly looking for additional input and feedback to kind of continue to fill and paint this picture, from consumers. And it does that by geo-targeting people who have their location settings on. So again, I'll speak from experience. Every time I walk out of a brewery, I get a push notification from Google and it says, oh, looks like you just left Big Ditch. Can you answer some questions for us? I say, sure. And it'll say sometimes simple stuff. Is there handicap parking? Do they offer to go? Are pets allowed? Is there, do you have to wear masks? Things like that. And it'll just keep asking me questions as long as you want to keep adding them. And that's helpful, and that's helpful for people looking for that kind of information. The problem is you still want to stay in a position of controlling the information, because I don't know. I don't know everything, The option for not sure exists, but I could be like, yeah, pets are allowed, maybe they're not. And so the next day there's a bunch of people showing up with their dog because they saw on Google that pets were allowed. And so that's where one of the things, even if you control the listing and you've kind of updated everything, you do want to kind of occasionally go in and look and just make sure that everything you're seeing is accurate and is up to date. Another example that we've seen as a part of this with Google My Business is specific to masks. So when there was mask mandates in place, it was pretty much just every business would be asked, are masks required? I wouldn't even have to leave a brewery, and it would just know that I had been to it historically and say, can you answer some questions? Are masks required? And so pretty much across the street, the answer was yes. Well, unless you made an effort to go in and remove that, it would still say inside of Google that masks are required. And so again, because at the snapshot of the time you did that, they were, and they might not be now, you just want to make sure that your communication is consistent. We had done an effort between, the last survey we had done and in the middle of the pandemic to try and kind of help continue to give input and feedback on best practices for breweries. And one of the things we kind of asked people to do was self-audit themselves and see if they had consistent, information across the board on all their sites and platforms and things like that. And I think only like 3 or 4 of the 150, that went pretty deep into some of their different listings said that that all the information was consistent. But one of the things that's important to note with that is we also have to be realistic. If I showed 8 social media apps options earlier, I'm talking about Google My Business, I'm talking about websites, I'm not even getting into TripAdvisor and Yelp and whatever else might exist out there. It would be a full-time job just to change all these times as these things happen kind of dynamically. And the problem in some of them, like I was saying with Google, is it pulls its information from other places. There's sites that you're like, I know for a fact I did not add our business listing to this website. It added it to their website dynamically by pulling information from Google at a snapshot of when they pulled that information. So what's the best practice, the best way to do it? And again, it goes to like kind of building out that foundational approach to social media, is kind of thinking of that customer journey again. So I have to close early today. Google is a good place to communicate that. Facebook's a good place to communicate that. Instagram's a good place to communicate that. Do you need to update your business hours on your website if you're closing a couple hours early? Well, because you're going to have to go back in the next day and rechange that back, the likelihood is Google will be the place. It'll never be airtight, and so the trick is never to say you need to sit down and find every type of place where you're mentioned and put that correct information in there or update it or whatever it may be, because it's not feasible. But if you think of, the people who follow us are going to know this information by way of Facebook. How can I get to the people who don't follow us, who might be looking for us? You can do that by way of Google. And so that's kind of what that trick could be. So honestly, what I would say is just, if you've got some free time later today or tomorrow or next week, and just deep dive into your own Google listing and just really see if you're like, oh, why does it say that? Or even at the same time add to it. And it doesn't have to be, reductive. You can add additional tags and targets and identifiers, because that's the way that when I'm searching for something, that it's going to have it pop up. Yeah.
Point out, just because it's happening. Don't forget Apple Maps. If you haven't claimed your Apple Maps, they pulled information forever ago from Google or whatever, and a lot of people have iPhones that don't have the Google Maps. And it'll say you're closed or you're not even open that day. Other thing, it's not pulling from Google. They built their own system, pull information off to the side, so you might lose all iPhone users if you're not claiming your own business on that. I found that out the hard way from a lot of people telling me that, oh, you've been closed. I'm like, we're open 7 days a week. Like, we're not closed. So that wasn't a COVID thing. That was just, they open 3 days a week. And yeah, they're closed, up until Friday. You can go visit them on Friday.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, I remember talking with someone who someone must have answered it as a question before they claimed their listing. Does this place offer tours? And someone said yes, and they didn't offer tours, and they're like, we couldn't figure out why people kept coming in saying, when's the next tour? Is it a free tour I saw? Like, we don't have to, and it was because it just was somewhere along the line, it was picked up, and then if it's not updated or addressed, it becomes kind of set in stone unintentionally. Yeah. So then, that's really the primary things that I really wanted to be able to Google Maps up is kind of talk about the main areas to kind of focus on planning out your customer's journey from a marketing standpoint. And if you kind of focus on where you're communicating Facebook to link to, Instagram to link to, and the website that you're sending people to, that they can kind of consume that information and plan from. And then obviously, driving them also from within Google or Apple Maps. Then what you're doing is kind of setting that foundation that now when you have a need and you're saying, okay, I want to put something up, I want to get a post out there, and I want to push them to the website. I want to get them to the careers page. I want them to see it. There's a place where they can present some information, and we can get, exactly what we're looking for rather than an email that says, yo, I'm interested, is it beer free? As like a starting place. And then also, whether it's associated to or related to staffing changes and the dynamic elements there, but if you just need to communicate updates about your brewery, about your business, where you're able to do that and how you can maximize that. So the last thing that I wanted to show, and if you saw my booth upstairs, you might have seen it up here. So I've got copies of this as well. But back when I worked, before coming to SiteSeeker, I worked at a brewery in Utica in the gift shop. And one of the things people really liked to pick up from us was that the many different varieties of beer poster. And that it was kind of a good visual of the complexity of the styles, and I always felt that I could actually deconstruct that and apply it to marketing, and all the different ways that you can kind of operate marketing for your brewery. And because what we'll see a lot is people say, oh yeah, I do social, I'm social media set. And what they mean is organic Facebook posts, which is good, it's important, that's a step of it, but that's just one branch, of Facebook, which is one branch of social. And so I created these, the many different types of digital marketing, sheets here, and kind of treat it as like a homework assignment. And actually I've got crayons at my booth if you really want to use them like a homework assignment. But I kind of say, circle in the ones that you're like, yeah, I'm doing this, yep. And then kind of take a step back and say, where might there be openings and opportunity to do more, whether it's in Google, on your website. We even include offline marketing because sometimes elements of things you're doing offline or with intention offline feeds into online. Perfect example is your branding, packaging, things like that. It's with the intention of being in a shop or being in the bar, but what you can do with it digitally is endless. So yeah, if any questions? There are so the same ADA compliance expectations. So within the writing of the ADA compliance laws for your physical location equally relates to your website as a virtual location. So it's under the same laws of ADA compliance that you have to adhere to for your on-premise that you have to adhere to for your virtual. Yep.
One takes free space, another technology built in, and we should implement that into the design.
So there's different elements with it. The conversation had come up, with even integrations of third-party things like where people will integrate Instagram or Facebook in. And you've probably seen sometimes posts underneath it, there's like really in-depth descriptions of what's happening in the image. Like that's with the drive for ADA compliance. The bones of it in something like Squarespace or Shopify or some of those different ones is very similar as far as if you're putting alt tags on the images, and you're putting, like, what I wouldn't recommend is if you're having an Oktoberfest and you've got a really nice but detailed poster and you just put the poster's image on the page, because now somebody who's using a page reader is not getting that information. Or if you're going to do that, just make sure you're replicating it where it's saying, September 17th at this time at this place. So that way, they're still able to access that. Yeah. There's tools, there's plugins for sites. Accessibility is one. And essentially what it does is it puts a pop-up in the bottom right, almost like a live chat would, and then people can click it and it'll kind of tie itself into the site, and then you can change the font, you can change the colors, you can change the margins, things like that. But yeah, there is, for the most part, those website platforms will have the initial compliance in it. Yep.
Is there a way, see under Big Ditch it says comfort, probably eatery is what it says. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of skimmed from the description. Is there a way that as a business you can change what that says?
In the Google My Business backend manager, there's tabs on the left-hand side. And so inside of the primary info, you have the ability to actually set those check marks, and then you can do tags about it and a business description. So you can change the business description that'll show, and then you can also change in some of these other listings. If you were to click them, it would build out a little, it could have additional information about, visiting and stuff like that, but you can control all that.
You can change the little cheat sheet summary of words?
Yep. Yeah, so Google Ads is a fantastic, advertising platform inside of Google. There's different types of ads that you can run inside of Google. So you're going to have search ads, and if you search inside the first results, if it says ad next to it, we call it pay per click, because if someone clicks it, you're paying Google for that click. And then the top ones underneath that are just organic impressions. You have display ads, so those are the actual image ads that you're going to see when you're on ESPN or a news site or eBay or anything like that. You can have, there's two types of display. There's static, it's just an image. There's responsive, so that's where like the image flies in and then text shows up, that kind of thing. You can get into YouTube ads. That's through Google's platform, to run video ads or even the image ads on YouTube. And then actually relevant to Google Maps is you can run Maps ads. So if you set up a Google Ads, account and instance, you can do a location extension, and you can just tag through your Google My Business account. And what'll happen is when someone's searching, typically search breweries near me, or in this case I did breweries in Buffalo, you can slingshot to the top of the list, and it'll actually say ad next to it. And like you see these pins in here that are showing up, or those different breweries, you can actually have it's a different color pin that would show up there, which would kind of denote that that one has an ad against it. Be very similar to search ads, and if someone clicks through you're going to pay Google for it. But when you're getting into ones like display and ones like these location extensions, it's much more affordable per click than search. Search is very much driven to keywords and what types of queries people will put in. I think for the most part, if I searched like brewery tour or brewery near me, what I've kind of historically found is it's more like beverage trails or like bus tour companies and stuff like that that are running those ads rather than breweries themselves. I think the biggest reason for that is it's a decidedly visual, industry. So you'd rather showcase, the location or the product so that people kind of have a little bit of taste of what to expect before they click versus just the name. But yeah, you can get a Google Ads account set up. Really, for the most part, there's good opportunities to kind of test the waters pretty regularly. Google will make like $300 to $500 available as an initial advertising spend. So you can say, I want to set this up. I want to get some, some ads out there and sort of see what that traffic looks like. But yeah, this is a good question. It's definitely, especially as you get into, like we said, if Google is the brain, it really gives that opportunity if you're kind of doing targeted ads to really pinpoint where people can show up. Yeah. Yep.
How do you claim your?
Yeah, good question. So, in perfect timing for this to come back up. So if you go to your Google listing, if it's not claimed, when you look, if you just search for yourself, and you can go and you'll see this. If you were to scroll up a little bit more down here, it would say own this business, claim this listing. And what Google will do is they'll mail you a postcard. You just have to sign in. They'll mail you a postcard with like a 10-digit ID on it, and then you just type it in and it's yours. To anybody else, if you have any other questions, and this was the last thing that I had. I said, that's what I made. It's over here. Feel free. I'm up at a booth upstairs, and I'll be here all day tomorrow too. So happy to chat about it. Do you have
another suggestion? Just especially if you get to your Google page, like you can mark anything open Christmas. We've been that way, and we don't get any. Like, I don't have.
Thanks again for the time, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.